Today we're going to talk about leadership development and church planting. Teach others to teach others. That's really the key. But in many ways, the selection and training of leaders are most important aspect of church planting because these individuals will not only manage the church affairs, they will model the faith for good or ill. David Hasselgrave said that. These leaders, okay, are going to be the ones who carry on. Now think about it. The men that Jesus chose when he chose his disciples, he knew that they would have the responsibility of sharing everything that he had taught them for 3.5 years and to carry on the work in his absence. He poured his life into their life so that they in turn could pour their lives into the lives of others. Okay, the church will not be a healthy church if the leadership is undeveloped. We need to make that a priority. Understand that when you start planning a church that you're going to find leaders out of that field who are going to lead the work. The church must be involved in leadership development. Absolutely must. There's no way around it. If you don't, the church will die. Where there is no vision, people perish. So says Proverbs. Though there are different types of leaders in the church, leadership development is about a process of leading someone to faith in Christ and equipping that person to become a fruit-bearing disciple who begins to reach others with the gospel. In my experience over in Africa, there's a church planter by the name of Blasio. And Blasio understood quite well the importance of developing leaders. As a matter of fact, Blasio would, anytime he would go out and have a crusade in another village, he would find 2 or 3 men from that village. And he would begin to disciple them, taking them with him to other villages, letting them see what it was like to hold a crusade, letting them see what it was like to start a church, letting them see what it was like to build up a Bible study that ultimately becomes its own church. Then they would go back and have another crusade in that village, and now you have some men who already have a better understanding of what a church is and how it functions because they had been developed. Okay, so we need to have that model with us. Okay, common obstacles. The first one, control. You say, what do you mean that is an obstacle? Well, the church planter often has the temptation to control everything. Many fear that unless they are in control, the new believers will not be able to function correctly as a church. Listen to me, beloved. Okay? Control is one of those things that will rob you from effectiveness. Let me give you an illustration that you might can relate to. Okay? When your mom and dad were teaching you how to drive, it's a very painful thing because mom and dad are trying to give you control of a vehicle. And if you lose control of that vehicle can become a deadly weapon. It can cause you to die. It can cause someone else to die. But the only way to teach you how to drive is to allow you to get behind the wheel and drive. That means the parent has to relinquish control of the vehicle. Yes, you're going to run into some curbs. Yes, you're going to, make some wrong turns. Yes, you're going to do some things improperly. But if you're never allowed to be given control of the vehicle, you can never learn. If you never make mistakes, you can never learn. So if you have the idea that you have to control everything, I'll give you a classic example. Many years ago, when the conservative resurgence took over, there were two men who had been missionaries in Italy for over 20 years. They were church planters. One was a preacher, the other, his partner, did the music. Now, they had a church in Italy that had over 500 members. Now, they never planted another church. That's the only church they planted. But for 20 years, they would not relinquish control to someone else. They would not allow someone else to preach. They would not allow someone else to lead the music. Therefore, their church planting efforts were basically just starting a church where they could serve for 20 years. Beloved, that's a poor church planter. Okay? They never understood the importance of relinquishing control. Another obstacle is no plan. Many church planners lack a plan of how to develop leaders. How do we teach them to drive the car? How do we relinquish control because it may look different than what we had envisioned? Okay? You got to have a plan. Going in, you have to have a plan. When I train pastors in Africa, primarily in Uganda, I tell them I want them to come up with a strategy because I don't want to be the hero in their wife's eyes. And I explain this. I say, if a robber comes in to rob you during the night, are you going to leave your family and go running to the missionary and say, "Missionary, what do you think I should do?" No, it is your family. I want to equip you so that you know what to do, so that when you do it, your wife looks at you as the hero, not me. Another obstacle is the inability to identify potential leaders. Failure to identify potential leaders will hinder the work. You say, well, how do you know whether a person is a potential leader? Try them. Give them a responsibility. Watch how they fulfill it. I mentioned yesterday about a man named Blasio. I remember Blasio as a student, and we were doing something, and we needed some rope. I gave Blasio some small money to go and buy a rope. He came back with the rope, the receipt, and the change. And I said, well, thank you, but you could have just kept it. He goes, no, this is God's money. I don't keep God's money. So I thought, hey, here's a man who has integrity. Perhaps he can be a leader. So the more responsibility I gave him, the more he showed that he did have potential. Okay? And look, he's a church planter now. He's planted over 30 churches. Poor understanding of the church is also an obstacle. They struggle with essentials and with extra biblical expectations. If you have a poor understanding of what the church is, and if you think that the church isn't ready until they have a good pastor, and they have a song leader and an active choir, and they have an active Sunday school, if they got to have a Sunday school director, and they got to, those are your expectations. Bible says nothing about a Sunday school director. Bible says nothing about a song leader. Okay? So if you have a poor understanding of what the church really is, it can be an obstacle for you to developing the right leadership. Let's look at Jesus' model, okay? He modeled the desired task. He said, watch me. He taught the concepts for the knowledge. He pulled his disciples aside and he explained to them, okay? So he taught the public, he pulled the disciples aside, and he taught the concepts for their knowledge. He then sent them out for on-the-job training, okay? Luke chapter 10, the 70 came back, okay? And they were rejoicing. He said, don't rejoice that the demons were subject to you, but rejoice rather that your names are written down, okay, in heaven. He continued to teach and correct them following their field-based training. Why do you say there's 4 months to harvest? The fields are widened to harvest. I must have needs go through Samaria. He was modeling for them, teaching them as he went along the way. I'm the vine, you are the branches. Why? There was a vineyard there. He used an object lesson. He empowered them to raise up other leaders from the harvest. After Judas Iscariot hung himself, the disciples knew they needed 12, so being led by the Spirit, they picked someone who had been there from the beginning, okay, who had seen everything that they had seen. And then finally, he removed himself so that the 12 could accomplish more. Jesus said, you'll do more because I go to the Father, okay? He had to remove himself to allow the 12 to take over. Let's look at the MAWL approach. Model, assist, watch, and leave. Okay? You model. Let them see what it is you're doing. Okay? And then you assist them in actually doing it. Then you watch them as they do it by themselves. And then you leave. Okay? You model, assist, watch, and leave. That's a pretty good approach. Here's the IU approach. Stage 1, I do the task and you watch me. Stage 2, I do the task and you assist me. Stage 3, you do the task and I assist you. Stage 4, you do the task and I watch you. Stage 5, you do the task and someone else watches you. And then you start back over again with stage 1. One of the things I liked about the CWT, Continuing Witnessing Training Program, that Southern Baptist had many years ago, was the fact that it had a model presentation in there. And in that model presentation, you were to go out with the trainer, with the facilitator, and you would observe him as he presented the model presentation. Then, the next time, he would start, and then you would take over, and he would assist you. And then, the third time you went out, you presented the whole thing, and he just watched you. There was that mentoring process going on. And that's a pretty good approach, that IU approach. Okay, I do the task, you watch. I do the task, you assist me. You do the task, I assist you. You do the task, and I watch you. And then 5, you do the task, and someone else watches you. So there are at least 4 times that you have been actively involved in whatever the task is. Okay, pretty good approach. Now let's talk about the direct versus indirect approach of leadership. Direct leadership is a top-down approach. It involves the leader being in control most of the time, and the people around him or her tending to be more passive. Now, this direct leadership approach, while it is effective while you are there, it doesn't always translate when you leave, because no one has had the control. It's not like passing the baton in a race. If they've never run and suddenly you hand them the baton, they don't know the rules. They don't know where to go or how to pace themselves or what their distance is or what they're supposed to do with it next. Okay? So while it is effective, and there are times where you need that direct leadership approach, the indirect leadership approach, I think, is better for the church planter. It allows for the leader to mentor, coach, and guide others. The reason why that is a better model, because that better resembles how you make disciples. Paul told Timothy, what you have seen of me in the presence of many witnesses, commit thou also to faithful men who are able to teach others also. Okay? That mentor, that coach, that guides others. Okay? And that would be a better approach in most church planting situations. Remember, there is no time limit. Okay? Does it take you more than a week to plant a church? Absolutely. Okay? Does it take you 3 months or 6 months or a year? Yes, all of those. Can it take you up to 3 years to plant a church? Absolutely. But if you'll do it right, then there's never a time where the leadership is not developing, and they understand now how to better develop leadership themselves after you're gone because of the model that you have displayed for them. That indirect leadership allows for the leader to do more than just command people to do stuff. Military is a form of direct leadership. The church should be more of an indirect leadership. Are there times the pastor has to step up and be that direct leader? Yes. Okay? But as far as model for developing leadership, the indirect approach has better it has better resources. It has a better attitude and a better success rate. So let me encourage you, as you are writing your papers, as you are developing these things, that you pay close attention to how you're going to develop leaders.